Welcome to Rink Rap. I am Jim Cerny, and he is. I was going to call you Puck Daddy, but that's probably like infringement, and I'm going to get you in all kinds of trouble at ESPN. But ESPN's own Greg Wyshynski. How are you, bud?
They still go. I still use the Puck Daddy moniker on our betting shows. They kind of crafted a persona for me on the betting shows where they just refer to me as Puck Daddy. I think they like it because it seems like I'm some guy with a cigar in the back of the sports book, giving out touts and prices and betting information. So it
Yeah.
still lives. Yahoo has never said anything to me about it because I don't even know if they really cover hockey much anymore. So it's probably all good.
Unfortunate but true. But before I went, when I was between Rangers and Sporting News in my career jaunts, I did some stuff with you, at Puck Daddy, and it was some of the most fun stuff I got to do. Miles Wood talking to his parents about him starting a riot at Madison Square Garden, and mom thinking, I can't believe he did that. We're gonna have to talk to him. And of course, Randy Wood, his dad, saying, "Boy, that was great." Just fun stuff like that. It was
Hey,
such a great outlet.
look, I make no bones about the fact that I think that what we were able to do at that blog, it certainly helped kind of push the coverage of hockey forward a bit as far as like, when we started doing it in 2008, it was very, very Canadian, very
Yeah.
straight-laced, very, very, game story kind of coverage of hockey. And I feel like we helped, along with other blogs and eventually podcasts and stuff, really push it towards more personality driven and especially like fan culture driven. I think that was a big thing too that we were able to accomplish is to have people understand that like if you talk about the people that are watching the games, then those people will also talk about you. So
Right.
it's the circle of life.
Well, listen, big news in the NHL, of course, and you've been covering it. Utah, Salt Lake City. You
Yeah.
fired up? You punched your ticket yet for your first trip to Salt Lake, or what?
I have been invited by Ryan Smith himself, the new owner of the Utah team,
Yeah.
to come out and see what's going on. It's interesting. I was doing a lot of interviews in Salt Lake because of this hockey thing, and I was telling him that like there's a bit of a knowledge gap between what players in the NHL and what fans in the NHL know about Salt Lake as a market and what the market actually is. And you know, I think it's a booming market economically. I think that it's the population growth has been very strong there. The NHL clearly likes the fact that it's a winter sports city, and
Yeah.
clearly, likes the fact that there's an arena that can house a hockey team and a dude and his wife Ashley that want to spend 1.2 billion dollars to bring one there. So you add all that up, and it's a great landing spot for a distressed franchise. But listen, I've said this before, and it got me in trouble actually with some of the people in Salt Lake, but I think that demographically, there's a bit of redundancy in going to Salt Lake if you're the National Hockey League. I'd be more excited about them going to Houston. I'd be more excited about them going back to Atlanta. I think the footprint of the league grows larger if you can tap into some of the demographic diversity in those cities. But for the situation that they are dealing with now, which is looking at a Coyotes franchise that at a minimum was going to spend until 2027 in a college hockey arena,
Yeah.
like they had to do something, and this was the place that made the most sense because they certainly were going to put the Coyotes in Quebec City. All due
Yeah.
respect to our friends in Quebec City.
Yeah. I know the door's been left open for Coyotes Part 2,
Yeah.
if you will. And Artie Verino's got the opportunity, I guess, within a window to, get a deal in the desert and build an arena and bring the Coyotes back to life. I don't see it. I feel like I've lived this for 2 decades now, and it never works. It never works out. So, what do you think the odds are there that we see Coyotes Part 2?
I have a healthy skepticism, but I think so does Gary Bettman. If we're being honest, like they had to figure out a way to get this team away from Alex Morello without Alex Morello putting them into litigation for 2 years. And the only way, not the only way, but the best way to do it was this gambit that they came up with, which is, hey, look, we'll still put our faith in you that you can buy this land this summer and build your arena there and your giant multi-use complex. And if you do it, then within 5 years, then we'll give you the Coyotes back as long as you give us $1 billion.
Yeah, right.
And so, like, I can see from Morello's point of view, stubborn as he is, if this works, great. Then I've proven everybody wrong. If it doesn't, then I just made $1 billion off a team that I bought for like $300 million, right? So I think it's a brilliant plan by the NHL. What's really interesting about their situation now, the Coyotes, I mean Morello and Coyotes vis-a-vis this land auction. So I was talking to some people from the Phoenix area who told me that it may have actually gotten harder for him to win this auction because the Coyotes moved. You had people that were maybe not looking to bid on this land because they didn't want to be the people that were seen as chasing the Coyotes away if they won the auction.
Right.
That might now throw their hat in the ring because the Coyotes are gone. So you can't chase them away. So in a weird way, the auction might be even more competitive for Morello by having let the Coyotes relocate before the land auction happened.
Well, Stanley Cup playoffs, I'm going to transition to that because I think we could talk all day about Coyotes and expansion. I have so many thoughts and comments and questions about future expansion. We'll do that on another trip because we got Stanley Cup playoffs kicking off this weekend. And I was rummaging through ESPN and your predictions, and well, all of your predictions there. And I know it says bold predictions, so I know you're thinking, we want to get somebody's attention and everything. Do you really believe, or does the staff really believe, that the Washington Capitals are taking the New York Rangers out in 7 in the first round this season?
I don't. I mean, I think that they're a pretty healthy underdog. I mean, there's one path to victory for the Capitals, and it's Charlie Lindgren, their goalie. Like, I mean, if he continues to play lights out, if he steals games, especially on the road, then they've got at least a puncher's chance. But, when you think about the Rangers and their depth, and you think about the Capitals and their situation where it's a mix of their veteran guys and younger players, like, they were able to eke into the playoffs, and I give them full credit for doing so because it was a very, very tight race. But ultimately, they're overmatched in this series. I mean, if they were to win this series, it'd be one of the bigger upsets that we've had since Columbus knocked off the Lightning. To put it in that context. So I never count them out because, quite frankly, I didn't think they'd make the playoffs, and quite frankly, I didn't think they'd make the playoffs even after I watched them this season, and they did. So they are still a stubborn bunch, a proud bunch, but a bunch that I think is a clear underdog in this series.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's why they call them bold predictions, right? Along with Toronto Maple Leafs winning the Stanley Cup. Not only winning a round or two, but winning a Stanley Cup this year.
Well, that wasn't my prediction.
Well,
my prediction was the Oilers would win the Cup, which is bold in and of itself.
In the big list,
I picked them in consecutive seasons, the Oilers, to win the Cup, and unfortunately for me, I have a kind of a rule that if the Stanley Cup final I pick before the season is still possible, I gotta run through the bracket with that still being my final. So, I got to craft a bracket that somehow gets Toronto and the Oilers in the final because that was my final. And I still think that they could do it. The Oilers are an interesting team. I think they caught a break in the seeding by not having to play Vegas in the first round by virtue of what happened on the last day of the season. We might look back at that LA Kings win over the Blackhawks and say that's what launched the Oilers on a run, because think of it this way, like, They've beaten the Kings in consecutive seasons. I think they're going to do it again. Vegas is playing Dallas. I think Dallas will take out Vegas. I think they're catching Vegas at the right time. The longer you go against the Golden Knights, the harder it's going to be to beat them. And so, Vegas will be cleared off the board. Then you got this Vancouver-Nashville series, and I think the Oilers can beat either of those teams. So they've got a pretty good path right now to, at the very least, the conference final. And then after that, they've got to probably figure out a way to beat the Dallas Stars, and if they do that, they're on their way. So I'm not as excited about it as I was before this season after seeing the Oilers actually play. I think they have some question marks insofar as, like, is their depth deep enough? Is their blue line good enough? Is McDavid healthy enough? But I do think that they are set up pretty decently in their division to at least make the conference final.
So who's the one team you don't want to face in the first round? As you look at the matchup, and it could be, a team that's been a dominant regular season team. It could be a team that squeaked into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Who's the team that if you're coaching your team, I don't want to face those guys. That's going to be a pain.
Well, Dallas is probably the big answer because just of they are the deepest forward group I think in the conference. I think they play really well defensively, and the only piece of the puzzle that hadn't fit yet was Jake Ottinger, and he's played lights out for the last month.
Yeah.
So they're really peaking at the right time. But the other one that I'm going to have to really get granular on some of these numbers when I make these predictions later today. But like the Winnipeg Jets are playing well again.
Yeah.
They are the best or second best defensive team in the league, and it really is like the old Gorilla Monsoon line from WWF. It's the irresistible force against the immovable object between Colorado and Winnipeg, because Colorado is the best offensive team in the league and Winnipeg might be the best defensive team in the league. Yeah. Something's got to give, and it's hard for me to imagine Colorado going out in the first round in consecutive seasons, but I think they're going to regret not winning the division because I think Winnipeg could be a really tough draw.
Yeah, that's my team. That's the team I want no part of. I want no part of Connor Hellebuyck, and I want no part of that team defense. And they have played really well all year, but the second half of the season, that's a good team, and that's a team that's being completely overlooked in my opinion.
And that went for the regular season too. Like the analytics community, to their credit, said throughout the first half of the season, you guys are sleeping on Winnipeg. Like, they before you know it, they're going to be leading their division, and lo and behold, they were at one point. So they've been consistently good on defense, and then you're wondering just whether or not they can scare up enough goal scoring to keep pace with what Colorado can throw at you. So I don't know. It may be an upset pick. It may be a pick that everybody's already on. I haven't seen what the rest of the noise is. We've been knee deep in Coyotesville for like the last 2 days, but it's one that I've definitely kept my eye on.
So for me in the first round, I mean, there are some great matchups. The first round's always the best. You just get these slugfests, and you get teams that shouldn't be knocked out of the playoffs this early that are going to be out in the first round. And I probably could pick a bunch of different series where I say, wow, that's going to be a great series. But the one that intrigues me the most that I'll be really dialed in on is Florida-Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the Lightning. I love John Cooper. He's one of my all-time favorite coaches, not only to deal with professionally, but I think he's a master at his job.
Yeah.
And I can make that argument that, Tampa's got one last kind of run in them here. And they may have the best player in the world on the team right now. You could argue that probably one of many different ways. But yet at the same time, in my mind, I'm like, well, Florida's my pick to win this thing. So how do I get to that final point by arguing that Tampa's so good? So anyway, that's the series that captivates me the most. What's the series that you really? I know you'll be watching them all, but really.
Boston, Toronto. Like I think the Battle of Florida is great, and I think it's going to be a real fun series. I do worry whether the concerns I had about the Lightning at the start of the season being their depth, and then increasingly Vasilevsky, who has not been himself this year. Yep. If he plays playoff level Vasilevsky, they'll win the series. If he doesn't, then the Panthers are surprisingly one of the best defensive teams in the league. So I think once you get past the top, four scorers or top four players in that Lightning team, there's not a whole hell of a lot behind them. Boston Toronto is fascinating because it's going to go one of two ways. Either the Leafs are going to wet their pants when they see the Spoked Bee across the ice and be like, oh, that's the team that beat us in Game 7 3 times in the last 11 years, or it's going to be like the Capitals and Penguins when the Caps won the Cup, where they had to overcome their tormentors and find that confidence and find that validation to catapult them to heights they've never reached before. And I don't think there's any in between. It's going to be one of those two things. It's going to be a fascinating series. I just like with the Lightning at the beginning of the season where I was worried about their depth, I've always been concerned about the Bruins up the middle since the retirement of Bergeron and Krejci. I know that guys like Zaka and Coyle and others have played well, but when you're rolling now up against Matthews and Tavares and Nylander, if they want to, up the gut, it's a tall order for a team that might be a bit of a donut. So never count out the Bruins. They certainly have a reason to play because they were embarrassed last year. And they certainly know that they've got a psychological advantage in the series. But I'll take Leafs in 6 because if it goes 7, they're screwed.
And you need them in the final to get
And I
them
need him in
through
the
the
final,
bracket.
right? Exactly.
So, quick final one for you. I know you got to run, and it takes us a little bit away from the Stanley Cup playoffs. The award season, yeah, the debates are great. I've seen your argument for the Hart Trophy debate and
Yeah.
all. I'm here. I'm based in New York. All I'm hearing is, oh, it's got to be Panarin, Panarin. I'm like, well, he may not even be a top 3 finalist. We'll see. But I'm not even going to talk Hart Trophy. Jack Adams, real quickly, can we make a case that Spencer Carberry and or John Tortorella can win this award this year?
Torts probably can't. One, because I think the Flyers needed to make the playoffs, and two, because I'm not entirely sure how the broadcasters, who are the ones who vote for that award, feel about the guy. Like, he
Yeah.
can be kind of prickly sometimes.
Yeah.
So I do
Really?
wonder if
I
whether,
had heard that.
yeah, you've probably seen it too. So like, I don't know how that plays within that body, that voting body. Carberry is going to really, I think, get some late support based on people taking a reevaluation of what the Capitals are. I do think the problem for him is that when you look at someone like Rick Tocchet, well, Rick Tocchet made the Capitals a better defensive team. And when you look at Andrew Brunette, he canceled their trip to go see U2, and they went, 18 games without a regulation loss. And when you look at Jim Montgomery, well, he kept the Bruins defensively solid and built a strong foundation, and they're a playoff team. And, there's other examples, too, throughout the league of guys that have done a great job. I think Laviolette's done a great job with the Rangers. I think for Carberry, the problem is that even with stellar goaltending from Charlie Lindgren that got them into the playoffs, they are still a historically bad goal differential team.
Yeah.
And so, that's not on the coaching. I think he's done a really good job. I think it's systematic of it being a team with veterans that don't like playing defense and kids that don't know how to play defense yet. But I think it's going to be, it's like trying to vote for a guy with a negative plus minus for the Norris. It's going to be really hard to make the case for Carberry when there are other candidates that are better, and also when the team doesn't necessarily come off all that exemplary when you break down the numbers on them.
Yeah, there you go. So you kind of made a case for him, but you kind of shot it down. I'm rooting for the underdog all the time.
I think in another year he might have a shot. He might still make the top 3, but it's been talking toward the entire season.
Not a lot there.
It's been talking toward the entire season, and I also think that Brunette's going to get some love, and we'll see how it goes. I think he might have a shot to get in just by virtue of the Caps squeaking through, but we'll see.
He's Greg Wyshynski. You can catch him at ESPN.com and all things ESPN. Thank you so much for a few minutes today. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the postseason.
Anytime.